Hey guys, this is Sean from Zero Ground FPV. Just wanted to film a quick build slash review slash impressions video of my latest build here. This little bad boy, we've got a Flynoceros Canis M5 V2. It's one of the newer frames that they've got out there. So just to go through a few things here, just want to walk you through all the parts I've used here and just a few kind of pro tips on how I set everything up. Mostly what I picked up from Gil and Troy, also known as Chef PV from Zero Ground FPV. So yeah, if you take a look at the descriptions here on the video, I've got all the links to where you can buy each one of the items I use. So if you want to go pick these up for yourself, go for it. And as I go through each part here, I'll make sure to call out who we picked them up from as well. So first, the frame really is what I want to focus on in the beginning. The Flynoceros, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. They're based out of New Braunfels. It's Zero Ground's in Austin, Texas, so it's always nice to be able to support another Central Texan here, especially in the FPV space. And this is just sort of an update on the original Canis frame with 3.5mm carbon for added durability. I've crashed this one many times now, and it's holding up super well. It's hit more than a few trees, and I'll try to zoom in on some other video, but other than scratching the paint that I use to paint the edges of the frame, no problems at all, no signs of any wear at all in the carbon. And yeah, you'll notice that green on the edges. I use a paint pen, an acrylic paint pen by this Multishot brand. You can get these at any sort of art supply store, and I think they're German or something like that, but they work great. And I sort of combine that on the build with some bling from MRM, Multi-Rotor Mania. I've got some of these sort of mesh ESC covered wire protectors there, and then I also got from them green hardware as well, and green hardware for the motors as well. And then you've got some of these Racekraft 5051 propellers on there as well, which those have been awesome. I'm a really big fan of those. This layout on the Canis, let me take the GoPro off. Well, first let me show you. It's a small frame. It's a tight fit for a 5-inch, but a GoPro, I've got a GoPro Hero 4 Silver. It does fit great on there. What I did was I just sort of took some adhesive padded tape, and I taped that on top in between the GoPro and the frame. And you can just kind of put the LiPo strap on that top arm there, and it sits nicely. So you take the GoPro off so you can see the frame a little bit easier here. But yeah, if you take a look at the layout here, the Canis, it's optimized for both racing and freestyle. It's also an X layout, so I hear from a lot of the tuning gurus that makes it a lot easier to tune. It's not a stretched X, but Flynoceros has a new frame out, and that is a stretched version. So that's what you're looking for. Go look for that. It's called the Cerberus. It's pretty sick. That's what Gil, 32 bits of Gil, is currently flying. I bought my bling parts there from Multi-Rotor Mania, but the Flyno shop also sells them. I didn't get mine originally from them, and so it was just kind of easier as already buying stuff from MRM, so just picked them up from them as well. But if you're buying the frame, on the Flyno shop, go ahead and pick up the bling hardware from them. And the motor screws are not in the traditional square layout. That's something worth noting. On these Flyno frames, you can see it's kind of like a plus layout where the horizontal ones are further apart than these vertical ones, and kind of it was vertical there where I was able to fit the screws, and then horizontal here. And so from what I've been told, there's some motors that I guess use that sort of layout. The motors I'm using are not. I'm going to go through those in a minute here. But really, I mean, you only really need 2 screws in there. I've never had any issue, and it's technically a lighter build with only 2 motor screws, so not a problem for me, but apparently some people weren't big fans of that. But by cutting out those 8 sort of duplicative screws, like I said, you save a fair amount of weight, so I don't think it's a big deal, but for some people it may be, and if it is, you can just get a little hardware file, and you can go through and file down the insides of those other 2 screw holes, and you can make it work. Yeah, so moving on to the motor. I'm using the Blackstar Drone Supernova motors. You can see here they are silver. They look awesome. They are 2205, 2300 kV motors, so I think they go really nicely on a 5-inch build like this. And you know, I'm a huge fan of these motors. Blackstar Drones is based out of Brooklyn. Our buddy Gannon runs Blackstar Drones, formerly Quadcopter NYC up there. Really good guy, always happy to support him, and he's got an amazing product here. I mean, these motors, I run them really hard and they don't get hot at all. I mean, you'll go all out in a race, in a freestyle, doing punch outs, you'll bring it down, and the motors always come down cold. And they're a really smooth flight, and they're also real quiet, I found as well with my setup. That may be a function of the ESC, but for whatever reason, they sound awesome. So yeah, huge fan of these motors. I'm not sure if they offer another KV size yet, but I would assume that's probably coming, if not. But these 2300 KVs with my 5-inch setup, they work awesome, and they pair very nicely with the ESCs I'm running that I'll get into in a minute, as well as the Racekraft 5051 props that I'm using. And just a few other things to note here. Blackstar Drones, they've got amazing customer service up there, super helpful. I know I'd ordered from them in the past, and 2 motors were clockwise versus counterclockwise. These were Emax motors, and anyways, Gannon just, you know, no questions asked, sent me extra motors and got them in 2 days, and it was a really nice thing of him to do. So been very pleased with the customer service, and they've also got a really nice sort of curated inventory on there. So do yourself a favor and check out blackstardrones.com. And another thing on these motors, they feature some arced magnets and a cooling system. Like I mentioned, they always come down cool for me, and as well as hollow shafts to make them a little more lighter, and steel stators. So it all combines for a really smooth and powerful setup. Not to mention, they also look really freaking cool, so that's a plus as well. Just really, really solid motors. And then moving on to the flight control board I'm using the Pyro drone Hyperlite F4 board, and talked a little bit with FPV before I was putting together this video, and he told me that basically this board was designed by one of the original CC3D Open Pilot engineers, and it's a new variant on the original design of the Open Pilot Revo F4 board. And so yeah, Troy described it to me as a sort of bare bones, only what you need version of the Revo board, created by the originator with no excess. So it's a $25 F4 board that runs Raceflight like a champ. So to me, it was a no-brainer. It's a nice looking board too. You'll see it in the middle there. It's black looking flight control board. And here I'll flash up on the screen. I've got a nice screenshot that shows the exact layout of how you built this thing, and you can hit pause and use this to reference. I used this the whole time I made my build. A few other things to mention here. I originally purchased this after finding out that the Raceflight Revolt had been delayed. You know, I really wanted to build a Raceflight rig. Gil had been talking it up so much to me, and that was what I wanted to check out. And yeah, so I built this originally, and I've been so happy with how this has flown. I've since got my Revolt in the mail, and I have yet to install it. Really psyched to use that Revolt, but yeah, I mean, this guy works great, and I kind of don't want to touch it for now. So I'll have a video later, I'm sure, on the Revolt, but for now, have no complaints at all about this flight control board. Moving on to the PDB, I'm using the Matek HubOSD Eco X Type, and I'll flash up a screenshot here. I referenced this the whole time I was going through in building. It's pretty self-explanatory. One really nice thing about this board is it has an integrated OSD in it, so you get your voltage, your amps, and you can even program in your call sign and whatnot. So it's pretty nice to not have to have another little module to plug in there. It's just already in the PDB. It also comes in an H-type board. I don't know who really flies H-frames anymore. No hate there, but if you do fly H-frames, or if that works better for your build, there's another version of it. And a little pro tip from 32 bits of Gil is I'll flash a screen up here on the side of his Cerberus. You'll see he soldered a capacitor onto the top of his batter leads of the PDB. This is because it can help to regulate power going to the board and keep your OSD up and running in flight as a sort of extra precaution. The board should come with a capacitor, but Gil says in his experience it's best to get one with low ESR, 25 volts, and closer to 1000 microfarads. One last thing is that when you're looking at the capacitor, the negative lead is the shorter one, so make sure you solder that onto the negative port. It should also be labeled on the body of the capacitor. Moving on to the ESCs I used the Aikon 30 amp BL Heli S ESCs. I ordered these pre-flashed with Multishot BL Heli 14.6 firmware and selected the RS2K optimized version of that. Little pro tip, when you're installing these, remove the heat shrink. You can go ahead and apply a bit of solder on the tip of the iron, press down on the solder joint, and gently pull the ESC motor wire from the ESC. It's very important at that time to make sure that you put a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron when you're doing this. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time melding the joint that's there on the ESC. But once you do that, you can gently pull that original ESC wire out of there. And you'll know you've done it right if the wire loosens up within about 5 seconds or so of heating it. Once you remove those wires that are intended to go from the ESC to the motor, then you can cut to size and pre-tin your motor wires, and you can heat those solder joints again and just slide that right back into that solder joint, and then you've got a nice clean, one wire leading from the motor to the ESC. So again, I just chose to use the leads coming off these motors and plug those directly onto the ESC, just removing the extra wire that's on the ESCs altogether. One last thing, I typically set my soldering iron to 750 degrees Fahrenheit when I did this work, so I found that worked great for me. I don't really have that strong of a science or engineering background, so I can't really say much else other than it worked great for me. And if you want to, I think that's a decent tip to use. So lastly, just a few more things I used in this build. I used a FrSky XSR Receiver. It's just about the smallest receiver you can find, and I also found it to be very reliable, easy to use in my other builds. I run S-Bus on this guy on all of my quads. And you just solder it to the board, bind it to the transmitter, so setup's super easy if you're using a FrSky Taranis like me. The Team Black Sheep Unify Pro VTX, I mentioned I'm using that. I'm also using a TBS Triumph as well, antenna there. And, those are both solid. They've really done me well. I have yet to find another video transmitter or antenna combo that works better. These guys are great. The Triumph is super durable. The reception's great. No complaints at all. And again, the older version of the Unify Pro requires a 5-volt power input. So just make sure you've got that taken care of. Or if you're using a 12-volt port on your PDB, make sure that you've got a voltage step-down regulator for that. And you can pick up both of these, both the XSR receiver and the Unify Pro from Gannon over at blackstardrones.com. So yeah, pick them up over there with your Supernova motors. Promise you'll be happy with them. I'm super happy with mine. Going into the camera real quick, I'm using the Foxeer Aero cam. Maybe you can kind of see it a little bit in there. And I've got a 2.5mm lens on that. 2.5mm glass lens I bought on GetFPV. But yeah, as far as the camera goes, I've typically used the Foxeer HS1177, which is kind of your standard FPV cam. And that's always been great by me. I wanted to try this one and try something different. It's got an integrated OSD in it that can also supposedly read your voltage. I never got that to work. OSD works, but it's kind of finicky, and as far as reading the voltage goes, it didn't work. So I just chose to use the OSD in the Matek PDB, and that works awesome. I'm happy with that. The only other plus on this Aero is that it's got a microphone in it, and that was really the main reason I put it on there. It's because I wanted to try using, whoa, lightning outside, but yeah, I wanted to try using a microphone when I'm flying just to sort of monitor the motors. Turned out that wasn't really for me, so long story short, I'll probably go back to the HS1177 whenever this camera dies out on me or I crash. I found my HS1177 to be super durable and reliable, so you know, this thing probably will hold up for a long time. And with regards to the OSD, you can turn it off. I did. And so the camera works great. Other than that, microphone works great. And I do hear that they have a V2 version of this Aero cam, and I would bet that they probably got the OSD sorted out there. So if you buy one of those, I bet you'll have good luck with the OSD. Foxeer's generally done right by me. So yeah, very happy with the cam. And yeah, one other thing I'll mention on that is that I don't know if you've ever checked out Oscar Liang's blog. He's another FPV guy, posts a lot of reviews and whatnot. He's got a great post on how to tune an HS1177 cam, and his recommended settings there are just amazing. They work great in day, great at night, and I highly recommend those. I have people fly my quad all the time, and they're amazed at the settings. Literally, the secret is I just copied Oscar Liang's settings from his blog, so definitely check that out, and his blog's a great resource. I've got a link to that as well below. And then so lastly, I want to talk about Raceflight. This is my first time flying anything other than clean flight, beta flight. I guess I did fly open pilot back in the day, but we won't talk about that. But anyways, going from beta flight to Raceflight was really a game changer for me. I am a huge Raceflight fan. Can't stress it enough. I know their software is currently in beta. By the time you see this, Raceflight 1, which is their first full version, is going to be out probably by the time you're looking at this. And I think it'll probably be much easier setup by then, and they'll probably work a lot of kinks out. So when I was working with my beta version, you know, there were a few little finicky things to get it working, but I did get it, and I'm going to go through those now just real quick. And once I did get it working, this thing flies incredibly on the stock tune. You can check out some of my other videos. I have a video flying a few in Colorado, a few races, and just look in the description. It'll tell you which build I'm flying. Fits the Flynoceros Canis. It's flying on Raceflight, and man, is it smooth. It's just, and I'm using the stock tune. All I changed were the rates in the Expo. And it just flies incredibly. Huge fan. It's really allowed me to step up my game in the both freestyle and racing space. I can't stress it enough. Do yourself a favor. Go get an F4 board and put Raceflight on it now. It's that good. And so anyways, you know, I'll jump through a few screenshots here. One thing you should do is, at least when I was working with this beta build, I found that when I downloaded Raceflight through Google Chrome, it was an older version of the Raceflight configurator, and so that led to a couple issues. So I also took my firmware from the Raceflight configurator that I was using, and turns out that wasn't the latest firmware as well. That also led to a few issues. So the way to bypass all these issues I had is very simple. Just go to raceflight.com, create an account. It's free. Log in and download both their firmware and the configurator files directly from their website. You do that, you shouldn't have any issues at all. Go there, download those versions, flash the firmware through the configurator, and yeah, there's a few blogs and tutorials that Raceflight has. I've got a link below. They've got a blog post called Things to Do After You Build a New Quad, and that is a really great tutorial on how to get Raceflight up and running and whatnot. So I definitely recommend checking that out. But to go through a few screenshots, first thing, this is what it looks like when I boot up Raceflight. You'll notice right away the motor configuration up there in the top left. And I'm not 100% sure, you'd have to go back, but I think the motors, potentially, they might be different than the Betaflight layout. I know this one's got motor 4 up in the top left, and then proceeding clockwise, motors 2, 1, and 3. So yeah, make sure when you solder everything in your ESCs that you get everything in that order there, and that that's all in great shape. So just one thing to keep in mind with your build. You'll also notice I'm not a big fan of motor stop. I've got this on disarming the quad regardless of throttle value. I think that's important. I didn't touch the minimum throttle or the minimum command. I've got Multishot turned on. Make sure your ESCs are Multishot compatible. I know the Aikon 30 amps I'm running are. And yeah, BLHeli with Multishot runs awesome. I think that's another reason why my build is so smooth and so on point, in my opinion, with this setup. But Raceflight obviously has a lot to do with it as well. If you're running S-Bus like me, make sure your S-Bus inverter's on there. I haven't messed at all with the loop times, so people probably have done that. This next screenshot here, make sure if you're running S-Bus again, you've got that set to RX serial under receiver mode. And then below that, serial receiver provider, you want that on S-Bus as well. Other features, black box should be turned on by default. You can use that to tune, and make sure you've got a fail-safe set. That should be on by default, but that's very important as well. Make sure your fail-safe throttle is below your min throttle. You want this thing falling out of the sky for sure, and not just flying on infinitely if the fail-safe goes off. Next one here, I've got my PIDs, and again, these are just the PIDs I'm using, the stock PIDs on the Raceflight firmware I've got. This is probably an older beta version of Raceflight compared to when you're watching this video. Whenever I do update, I'll probably make a video and go through that then. But anyways, these are the PIDs I'm running now. Let's see, on the modes here, I've got ARM, programmed to my aux1 switch. It's a 3-prong switch, so when it's all the way down, it's disarmed. When I move it up to the top or the 3rd position, it's armed. And then scrolling down here, I've got the schizo mode, which I use pretty much always to fly with. I really like the feel of it. I'm more of a freestyle guy, so maybe that's why. But I've got that set to 3rd position. So at the end, what you have is on that switch of mine, when it's in the bottom position, it's disarmed. When it's in the middle, it's in rate mode. And when it's on the top, it's in schizo mode. So anyways, big fan of that. That's my personal preference, but you can map those how you want. Here I've just got the ports, and I'm running the receiver, my FrSky XSR, through UART1. Make sure you have that set to serial as well. Really, I don't know a lot of the nuts and bolts here, but putting it on UART1, setting it to exactly these settings I've got, worked great for me. I had a few issues when it wasn't set to this, and honestly, I can't really explain why it didn't work, but this works for me, so hopefully this setup works for you as well. That's really, I think, everything I wanted to go through. Again, I've got links at the bottom for all the blog posts I mentioned, like for Oscar Liang, as well as all the sites where you can purchase all these products, where I got everything. I'm super pleased with my Canis M5 V2. Awesome frame, couldn't be happier with it. Also couldn't be happier with Raceflight. I think it's amazing. BLHeli Multishot, also amazing in my opinion. So happy with all of it. You know, I'm not even interested in messing with D-Shot yet, but that'll probably be next down the line. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. So do yourself a favor. Check out Raceflight. Check out BlackstarDrones.com. Pick yourself up some Blackstar drones, Supernova motors, some Flynoceros frames. Also check out their Stretch X, the Cerberus. Again, Raceflight. Check it out. Do yourself a favor. And lastly, you know, subscribe. Trying to get some new subscribers here, and check out Zero Ground FPV. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, ZeroGroundFPV.com. We've got Gil, Gars, Burst, ShFPV, Crux, and myself, all based out of Central Texas here. We do a lot of flying, do a lot of videos, especially ShFPV. So check us out, like, subscribe, and comment if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. So yeah, have a good one.